or a PDF.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for your patience while we get all of our technical capacity together. Thanks for being here today, and happy Friday. So we just have a few college updates, and then of course I'll turn it over to Anne-Marie to present our 23-24 operating budget. So just a couple highlights, of course, is that we had commencement on May 13th. Thank you to Supervisor Wild and Supervisor Clary for being there to be part of the joy of one of the best parts of doing our work is to watch students actually complete their degrees. A lot of excitement. We had some great student speakers, really powerful stories. And so thank you for supporting us to be able to do that for our community. And then last night I attended our Early College Career Academy completion ceremony. And as a reminder, that's our program where we work with, in partnership with BOS, all of our component school districts and many business partners, where students can select between 4 different career paths. Some starting in 9th grade, others starting in their junior year. They take half of their day here on the college campus, earning college credit towards a degree, and the other half of their home district. Last night we had 54 students complete, and just to give you a sense of that 54, they completed 1,462 college credits during their junior and senior year. Most of the students, that's almost half of an associate degree while they're completing high school. Because of the way the financial model works, it's at no cost to the student. And so that's a pretty exciting opportunity for our community. And then 60% of those students are continuing on at SUNY Adirondack, which is a great capture rate of those students to be able to complete, again, an associate degree in about a year with us. And then I just learned this morning that 2 of our mechatronics students, the students that completed the advanced manufacturing and career pathway, are heading out to a national conference in San Francisco around the semiconductor industry to meet with all of these amazing big corporations all over the world to learn more about the semiconductor industry, which is, Global Foundries being a big player in that. So the experiences that these students get at 16 and 17 years old is phenomenal, and just really proud of that.
Yeah, here it is.
Okay. So just to run through a couple updates beyond that, there we go. So just to recap this year, as you know, we've been experiencing some enrollment decline like every community college and many four-year colleges across the state and the country. But this past fall and the spring, it seems like that stabilized, which was a good trend. We want to see that stabilize and then gradually increase again, of course. And even just as important is because of all the work that's happening on campus to support student success and especially support some of our students that have the highest needs, we're starting to see those achievement gaps, particularly our low-income students and students with needs, being able to close that gap. It's very unfortunate that in many cases, students who come with the least resources struggle the most to get through college. That would be logical. We have, through many grant programs and part of our operating funds are used to really attend to those students with the most need. And this year we finally saw the data that really showed that they're almost parity in terms of their retention rate of students who receive Pell, which is the federal grant program for low-income students, and those that don't. So to us, that's a good sign that all the work that we do, it's never one thing that's going to make a difference for the student, but it's really that collective work that can make an impact. So excited to see this enrollment isn't just bringing new students in, it's of course keeping the students that we have. We did launch 2 new training, what we call boot camps. One has migrated from what was called electrical maintenance technician to now industrial maintenance technician. That program was specifically designed in conjunction with Global Foundries to be kind of a pre-apprenticeship program. So they come out of a 10-week boot camp with a skill set ready to be then introduced to an industry, whether it's global or not, any advanced manufacturing industry, with at least the first step of skills so that they can then move into an entry-level position. And then we also launched a new program in what we call IT Help Desk, which was another type of boot camp model to give the students skills and being able to do entry-level work at the help desk level. To be able to do that over 10 weeks versus an associate degree is a pretty big step. And the nice thing is that what we're seeing is, and what we had hoped one of the outcomes would be, if the students in the boot camp are like, you know what, I think I can do more college work. And now they're starting to enroll in our degree programs out of that. That's a wonderful way to show an on-ramp to a person that may not have the confidence to do college level work and now have gained the confidence to continue to develop their skills and being able to move up in their career path. We worked across the campus on what we called an academic master plan. So really looking at the next 3 years at all of our academic programs, the ways in which we serve students both in and out of the classroom, and developing a strategic approach to being able to look at programs that are working, which programs are struggling, what can we do about it, and a lot of ancillary work around our academic offerings, which of course is our core business. And then coupled with that, we also developed our first strategic enrollment management plan, really looking out 3 years, developing enrollment goals on a gradual increase, looking at the populations that either we're not serving as well as others, and what can we do about that. So the college worked very hard on these 2 plans. They moved through our shared governance structure as well as our board of trustees. And now the TRIP will be implementing the elements of the plan. Of course, you know that we completed our multi-sport, well, almost completed. We're like this close of completing our multi-sport turf field complex. Thank you to those of you who came to the ribbon cutting. It was a very exciting event. And of course, we already started using the turf field on a limited basis this spring for our baseball program, and also being able to offer it for practicing. And I'm happy to say that starting probably the end of July, early August, we'll also be able to offer that for rental revenue, which of course was part of the model. So not only being a college asset for our intercollegiate athletics, but also being an asset to the community. So we're anxious. We've been receiving inquiries about it over really the course of the year, and now determining what we'll be able to accommodate in the coming months. As you know, we have a wonderful nursing program, and I'm happy to say that our nursing graduates in this past cohort achieved a 97% pass rate on the NCLEX exam, which is their exam to become licensed. The state average is around 73%. The state average is around 79%, and the national average is at 73%. So for our nursing students to be able to achieve such a higher pass rate, this is a testament, of course, to the faculty and our partners in the community. And then we were part of a consortium grant with Schenectady Community College, Fulton Montgomery, and Columbia Green. We applied for a grant through the Department of Labor to be able to scale up curriculum and other support services to support the emerging hemp cannabis industry. Our portion of that funds was really supporting on cultivating hemp. We will not be growing cannabis on campus, we'll be growing hemp. It's a similar cultivation process, so we'll be able to teach people that cultivation process. And then the other arm of that credential will also be the business of cannabis. So our faculty have been working on a curriculum development model in consultation with our partners, and that will be rolling out probably sometime this year. Just as a recap of our funding, because it does, of course, play a big part of our budget. So the 23-24 allocation from the state was flat to last year. And just as a benchmark, the allocation that the state has given us this year is about at our 2010 levels across the sector as well as at Adirondack. Although we were disappointed to not be able to achieve our advocacy request, and thank you to those who advocated on our behalf. We had asked for flat funding and a 4% increase, which really was a modest increase, a total of about $16 million for the entire community college sector. We did not get the 4% increase, but we at least were able to maintain our aid from last year. Probably the most important thing that we really worked hard at, there was language in the executive budget to hold back 20% of the community college's operating budget in lieu of some sort of plan. Fortunately, we were able to get that language removed because 20% of a holdback of our budget would have been detrimental to not only we were successful in that. We were successful in advocating to maintain what the governor had proposed, which was a $75 million transformation initiatives fund for SUNY, not just community colleges. That remained in the budget, and we're just beginning the conversations with our system administration folks to understand our allocation of that fund and what we're able to do with it. It's not operating dollars, it's one-time funds to focus on things like workforce development, enrollment initiatives. So we're certainly grateful for the fund, but it is one-time funds, which always makes it a little tricky, as you all know, that to sustain things over time, initiatives that you put in place leaves you, at a quandary of being able to figure out what exactly you can do with those funds. But trust me, we will use the funds as we expect to. And then the other component of the state budget that was new is that there is a requirement for the SUNY system to develop a plan that goes to the State Department of Budget by January 1st about how SUNY, not just community colleges, the entire system, will continue to address some of the enrollment challenges that we have, much of that driven by demographics, and fiscal stability for all campuses. So we don't know a lot of details about what that plan is going to look like. We expect to be involved in some way of developing that plan, but details remain to be seen. So I just wanted to give you a snapshot, because what you may read in the paper is historic investment in SUNY. That is the case for the state operating campuses, but it is not the case for the community colleges in this particular budget. And again, we're grateful that the state has at least maintained our funding, but we will continue to advocate for more funding to support our operations. And then just a quick look ahead, fall 23 enrollment, which of course we're actively working on now. Our applications have continued to trend ahead of last year. Registrations are coming in, and we expect to be at least on par, if not a little bit ahead of last year's enrollment, which is a good sign. We talked a little bit before, but as you know, we have our site in Saratoga. We've applied for what's called branch campus status, which allows us to move from offering just a smattering of courses and almost a degree at Saratoga to offering full degrees at Saratoga, which we believe will engage more students in wanting to take their courses and full degrees at Saratoga as well as at Queensbury. We expect that to be an enrollment driver. It's a lengthy process. You have to actually amend your college's master plan, which has to be ultimately approved by the governor's office. We made it through the first big benchmark, which is SUNY approved our request back in April. And now it goes to the state education department. They review it. It's coming out in the next, week for a 30-day comment period, which is a typical process. And then hopefully that all will go well. It'll go to the governor's office and it'll be signed and we'll start moving on that. As I mentioned before, we do have our strategic enrollment management plan. I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the benchmarks that we've set to rebuild enrollment to pre-pandemic levels, and the numbers are. And that, again, enrollment is not just new students, it's also retaining the students that we have. You saw in the budget book, and I know Anne-Marie's next on this agenda, but we always like to highlight a couple of our alums from our sponsor counties. And here's one of them, Jason Hall, whose wife also works here on campus, is a supervisor at Irving Tissue, and we're proud of his success. And then Stephanie Denko is also from Queensbury, and is working in the nursing field. So as always, our most shining moments are our alumni, and we're proud of all their accomplishments. So with that, I'll stop and answer any questions you might have about my portion. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Yeah, the two boot camp programs you have, is that tailored so that businesses will actually invest in the student, and maybe they do take them right away, but actually pay for them to come back to college?
That would be great. I can't say what every business will do, but yes, the goal is to get them kind of the entry level.
Is it being merchandised that way though?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And the nice, like I said, with the industrial maintenance technician, that was created with Global Foundries with the idea that they would be moving into this apprenticeship, and that has started happening. The IT help desk, we know that they come out of with industry recognized certifications, so that does give them a leg up in being able to.
Will the apprenticeship still have them like taking night courses or something to keep?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. Other questions?
What is NCLEX?
Oh, the NCLEX, please don't quote me on the actual acronym, but it is the certifying exam for nurses to be able to be licensed. So it's the national exam that all associate or any RN has to take in order to become a registered nurse. But I can't remember what the acronym actually stands for. Something national, something exam. Thank you. Okay, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. We're going to go over the 23-24 operating budget each year. I basically just read to you the budget book because of the type of information included in it. So I'll just apologize right now if it's not super exciting. But we're going to start really on page 1 of the budget book that you have in front of you. And again, this is our proposed 23-24 operating budget, which our Board of Trustees did approve at their most recent board meeting. So starting on page 1, the sources of revenue for the college. The first is tuition and fees. As you know, we do value open access. We remain one of the most affordable community colleges in the New York State system. For next year, we proposed a tuition increase of $120 per semester for full-time residents. We did meet our projected enrollment for the current year, 22-23, and as Dr. Duffy mentioned, we have budgeted for a very conservative increase for 23-24 with the hopes of not just meeting, but exceeding that projection. This results in an increase in tuition and fee revenue for this budget over the current budget of $680,000. The next source of operating revenue for us is sponsor support. We are very, very grateful to you for agreeing to increase your support of the college over a 5-year period. For the first year, it results in approximately an additional $210,000 in support. Most importantly, that sponsor support is a primary driver of the chargeback rate and college investments such as our Saratoga Center, student housing, enhancing our athletic fields, and some unique degree programs that we have resulted in enrolling many students from outside of our sponsor county, and that significantly increases the chargeback revenue to the college. Chargebacks is the next source of revenue that we have. We receive operating chargebacks from counties in New York State that are non-sponsors whose students attend SUNY Adirondack. The largest contributor is, of course, as you know, Saratoga County. The budget for next year has an increase of $1,920 to the chargeback rate, which will result in an additional $1.8 million in revenue for the college. This is a direct result of 2 pieces of the operating budget. The first, your increase in sponsor support. We've talked about that quite significantly. The second will be the amount of fund balance that we're projecting to use in this budget, which we have planned to do over the course of the pandemic. We increased that fund balance knowing that we would need to use it in our kind of first year coming out of what we consider to be austerity budget. So that's where we are. It was planned, it's not expected. And that counts as your sponsor share, which helps to increase that chargeback rate and that chargeback revenue. The next form of operating revenue to the college is state aid. As Dr. Duffy mentioned, unfortunately, but fortunately, the state appropriated 100% of the current year approved base aid. This is the 3rd year it's been flat following a year with a 5% reduction. So this is very difficult for us as a community college sector. That being said, they are providing some additional funds through the transformation initiative. And as I've mentioned to you, the state views their TAP payments as counting towards their support of community colleges as well. As it relates to other revenue, if you happen to really dig into our financials, which I'm certain most of you don't, but if you do and you notice a significant decline in planned other revenue, that is because we're returning to the pre-pandemic levels of other revenue. During those years, the HERF funds that we received from the federal government were recorded as other revenue because that's where they go. So they looked very high during the last 3 years. Those were the HERF funds that we received. That grant period has ended, and so we won't be receiving them anymore. So we'll be returning to pre-pandemic levels of other revenue. For operating expenses, the college has what we consider to be 3 primary types of operating expenditures. The first is what would be considered incremental operating expenditures. This is the majority of our expenditures on campus. They're focused on stability and continuing our existing commitments. As you know, due to the nature of our work, the majority of our expenses are personnel and benefits. And so those kind of fall into that category of incremental operating expenditures. The proposed change in budget for this category is just over $1 million or 3.4%. And again, mostly result in contractual obligations to our existing employees. If you're following along in your budget book, we're going to turn to page 2 and talk about strategic investments. As part of our long-term financial plan, the college does aim to invest a portion of its operating budget each year to fund its strategic priorities. Like Dr. Duffy mentioned, we have an academic master plan, we have an enrollment management master plan, we have a strategic plan for the college. It requires investment to continue to grow and meet the needs of today's students and our local area as well. So we try to put a piece of our budget aside to dedicate towards those priorities each year. We aim for 1 to 2%. During the austerity budget periods caused by the pandemic, we paused nearly all strategic investments that were not directly funded by federal HERF dollars. So we continued ones we had previously started, but we did not start anything new. So we're trying to go back to being able to reinvest a portion of our operating budget into that. The goal for this year is 1%. It's about $312,000. It will fund strategic investments such as updating the college's website. The next major source of expenditures for the college is equipment. During those austerity budget periods, we significantly reduced all one-time equipment purchases that were not eligible to be purchased with the federal HERF dollars. As we return to normal operations and enhance that work that we do, some of these equipment deferrals have become what we consider to be critical. We identified 3 main areas of concern. The first is information technology and cybersecurity, end-of-life equipment and enhancements that we feel are needed. Those total about $800,000. Health science nursing has end-of-life equipment replacements and upgrades needed for their lab area. Those total about $250,000. And we've identified public health, public safety equipment and replacements and upgrades of about $240,000. Together, these purchases represent 3.2% of our total budget request, an increase over the current year, and they make up greatly the total budget increase that we are presenting to you for this year. So again, they are one-time purchases that won't necessarily need to continue into the future, but we've gone about 3 or 4 years without purchasing any equipment at all, and we have some significant needs that really do need to be addressed. For our total operating budget, we continue to be what I would consider, and I hope you consider to be very good stewards of SUNY Adirondacks financial resources. We have appropriately expanded and contracted our budget as enrollment grows and declines. As a reminder, in 2020-21, before the pandemic, we reduced our operating budget by $1 million in response to what had been enrollment declines at that time. Throughout the COVID pandemic, we implemented what we consider to be austerity budgets with essentially no increases, flat budgets for a 3-year period. And as we move out of that time period, the budget that we're presenting to you today reflects what would have been just a minimal 1.5% increase over each of those 3 periods for a total of $33.1 million. If you turn to page 3 in your budget book, we're going to discuss the unrestricted fund balance. We are budgeting to use a portion of our unreserved fund balance in 23-24. During those austerity budget periods, we did put money back into the fund balance very intentionally, knowing that we would need it to be able to return to pre-pandemic levels of enrollment as we came out of that period. We are considering this to be our first year out of what would be an austerity level budget and are appropriating $1,598,451 of fund balance. It will leave us with a remaining fund balance of almost $2.6 million, which is still greater than what we had before the pandemic. So we do feel like we're continuing to increase the strength and fiscal stability of the institution. And as a separate note, those dollars don't include the fund balance that we keep in a board designated account to cover our self-insured health insurance. So that fund balance is just over $2 million. It represents 6 to 7% of our annual expenditures on health insurance. It meets what the college's health consultant suggests that we keep in a fund balance for that. So it is what we would call fully funded. And that is in addition to the $2.6 million. In summary for you, personnel and benefit expenses total 70.5% of this budget request. I do need to note that this is materially below the 80% benchmark that really is established by SUNY. Our College Board of Trustees is very accepted in our industry. This is good from one perspective because it shows that we are managing our budgeted expenses in line with our enrollment and our revenues. On the other hand, this really does reflect almost a 10% inability to address the needs of the institution. So we consider to be pretty bare bones at this point when it comes to personnel, and really do feel that some additional personnel is needed to meet all of the needs of our students for sure. But we have adjusted our personnel appropriately to match our revenues. Students fund 36.4% of all revenue. This is good news. At one point in time, it was 50%. We kind of said to ourselves, we never want to be above 50%. We set that internally as a benchmark. It has declined each year over time. So that 36.4% still higher than we would like, but it has dropped a little bit, partly in response to your agreement to increase your sponsor share, but also the amount of grants that the college has been receiving. And lastly, we are very grateful for that incremental increase in sponsors contribution. It's an additional $208,000, just so that you know that resulted in a $100 increase in the chargeback rate. So that's good news. So in summary, we are asking our sponsors to approve our proposed 23-24 operating budget of $33,182,221 and a restricted grant budget of $2,306,493,000 for a total budget including grants of $35,488,714. And I believe that we have provided draft resolutions for you with those numbers in it. I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Yeah, the summary page, am I missing it? Am I over?
Oh, it's not in the book.
It's just in the presentation, not in the book.
Okay.
But the information is in the book. It's more summary.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, you can have a copy of the PowerPoint as well.
Thanks.
Yes.
Emery, how did 2022-23 end up? It neatly revenues reflect expenses, but is better than budget on revenues or budget on expenses? I see that nothing changed in the fund balance, so it didn't look like anything. How do you do that?
So that's a great question. Our year is not over. Our year doesn't end until 8/31. So we're putting this budget together several months before the end of our year. In addition, although we really do know our fall and spring enrollments by this period of time, a significant amount of our expenses is still yet to be spent, right? So, you know, we're putting this together in April, May. We still have May, June, July, August for personnel and benefit expenses, Plus, most of our equipment type purchases do happen over the summer months when we can get that work done, when there aren't as many faculty and students on campus. So we anticipate being pretty much in line with the budget that we put together for this year. We're not anticipating anything major that we can see at this point in time. But Eric gets a little nervous every time I commit to things at the beginning of June. He says, there's a lot of months left to go. But essentially, we're not seeing any red flags that would, concern us at this point.
And then the use of your fund balance, is that in your consideration to offset the loss in other income or other?
That's a great question. The other income was the federal HERF funds. What those dollars allowed us to do, in addition to really what we consider to be austerity level spending, was put some money into the fund balance during those 3 years, knowing that we would need it when that HERF fund grant period ended and when we were trying to come back to normal operations. So we had planned on spending that amount this year. It will, essentially use what we had put away during the fund balance, or excuse me, during the austerity budget period. So the reality is, as we move forward, we will not be able to continue to pull money from our fund balance. So we'll be relying on enrollment to continue to return in line with what Dr. Duffy laid out. And, hopefully an increase in state support as well. It will be needed.
Then one more follow-up.
Sure.
The trustees or so have a fund balance reserve you shoot for that 8% or more that you try to keep?
We do not have a fund balance policy here at the college. We do monitor it over time. We'll have a little over 1 month's operating expenditures, which is what we've really always had. We might like it to be more. There are challenges that come along with that as well, right? So it is monitored by people such as the state. If they see that the community college sector has a lot of fund balance, we feel that they try to get us to use it by cutting state aid. So we do try to monitor and make sure we don't have excessive amounts. But I think you each have far more than 1 month's operating expenditures in your fund balance. We would like to as well. But it's difficult for us to do that. You have to have more revenue than you have expense. And it does also negatively impact your chargeback rate when you put money into the fund balance. So, yes.
Is the college's foundation integrated into the operating budget, or how do those two entities cohabitate, I guess?
Sure, that's a great question. Yes, it is. In many different ways. The majority of funds that the foundation supports are either through student scholarships, which show up in tuition and fees on here, not a direct payment to the college, but they pay a portion of the student's bill. So it comes in as tuition. The other major source of funds that the foundation does support are our capital expenditures, which are not in this budget. This is the operating budget, but they do also fund strategic operating priorities that the college has as well. So it's not the majority of those areas is really direct fund to students in support of our capital projects, such as the synthetic turf field. But they do fund strategic priorities operationally for us as well.
So that's less that you would have to take out of your general fund.
Absolutely. And it can, it's reflected in here in other revenue.
And just as a highlight, we just got a report from SUNY to show, foundation fundraising amounts across the community college sector. And our foundation was within the top 5 community colleges. Considering our size, that's pretty impressive. So the amount of money that we're able to award to students and scholarships is very significant. Again, for a school that size, I'm very proud of the work.
So a few comments and questions.
Sure.
So I think the reality on what he just asked, probably the turf field was one of the things the foundation had a lot to do with, right?
It did. The foundation, as well as the Faculty Student Association and the Adirondack Housing Association, basically split the cost for the synthetic turf field, along with chargebacks that we received directly from state and
I think
county.
that's important for our counties to know that our county funds didn't pay for that because we have people to get upset with certain things that we think is outside the realm. And that's something that the college needed that we didn't fund. So. It's
Well,
nice.
just to be fully transparent, though, the Warren County Occupancy Tax Committee approved a $500,000 commitment over the next 5 years as part of that foundation fundraising. So this
Very
one,
good. And but it's good for us to
Yeah.
all know.
one-time funds, and yeah.
So a couple of things, the federal HERF funds, are they done? Was that just COVID based or is it? So are they totally done or they have to be spent by and nearly done? Where are we at with those?
So that is the American Rescue Plan Act funds for institutions of higher education. We refer to them as HER funds. That grant period is essentially over. It's not technically done yet. It ends this month. We have pulled down the majority of those funds. A very small amount remaining as a piece of our mental health and wellness funds that we're continuing to spend. We'll be sure that we pull them all down at an appropriate time, but I wanted to ensure that they were recorded appropriately. So for the mental health and wellness, we have to have spent the dollars before we can pull them down. We're still receiving some invoices. So there's a couple $100,000 left in there for us to pull down. But we will make sure that we pull them all down before the end of the grant period, which is this month.
Okay, so that's the same reality we're under as county governments too with all our funds.
Yes, I think that there were some extensions that were available for certain areas if we hadn't spent them, but we had a plan that we managed very, very closely, and we had planned on spending all of those expenditures. Some of them for air quality improvements are going to be spent in the future and matched with SUNY capital dollars. That was part of the capital request that we're just about to talk about that you approved last year. But we have pulled those down already and they're waiting in a capital fund to be spent.
And just another point of clarity, the difference in some cases with what the municipalities had and what higher ed received in New York State, we were subject to requirements of how we could spend some of those dollars from the State Division of Budget and SUNY. So we had more restrictions to some extent that, just we've been working through, and mental health and wellness, for example, was a requirement that we had to spend at least 5%, I think it was, of our funds, which is all good. It's just that we have some different restrictions that we worked through.
So that's a great reminder for me also about the fund balance. A significant portion of those funds, they required us to take as lost revenue and put into our fund balance to spend in this upcoming year. So that was one of the things that the state had required of us,
So on that note,
probably reflected in their investment in community colleges for the year.
so then on that note, then your strategy worked to put that away during austerity, to take it back out now.
Yeah, it really was the state strategy, but yes.
As long as it worked, it doesn't matter. Going back where Craig went, your budgets are a lot like ours. We could go in July and August, September, year end comes in January, and we just heard out in May what our final is. So you're basically under the same timelines as we're at. It is tough when you're juggling what really happened and what's going to happen, and you have no answers to either at the time. So.
I mean, we've experienced the same that every other organization has experienced in terms of a lot of personnel vacancies. And that unfortunately has continued from a personnel perspective. It's not helpful from a finance perspective. That's the area that's really on top of the budget. And we've experienced the same thing.
So it's a very good report. I really like it. The one thing I don't see, you gave the actual cost of what you thought tuition was for regular students. What's the actual cost for room and board for a typical semester? That's the only thing I didn't see. I think it's good for us to all be aware of what those are.
That's a great question. We didn't put the,
It's a separate entity.
You're right.
Yeah, so.
That's what this all,
Yeah.
when someone
Yeah,
asks,
sure.
you know, that,
And then separately, the AHA is our entity.
I thought I had printed it out and included it, so I was looking through what I have in here. But I only have their total budget. Yes, I'm sorry.
Well, onto the enrollment, then go back onto your intro. Drop me there. The high school credit hours, you're seeing a decrease in that?
It's definitely better from their forecast. So our personal forecast, the enrollment for next year is very flat. That's one area that fluctuates. That's very well.
The distinction, we have a lot of programs that are from all grade. That is a reflection of the courses that students take while they're still at their high school and they're offered at their high school. The early college program that I mentioned is a little bit different. And those courses, they're actually registered for on campus. So it's reflected in a different place. So that makes it a little bit confusing. So yeah. You know, as the high school enrollments have dropped in some cases, it's going to be reflected in the number of school. We're still offering a very robust program across, I think we're in 22 different districts. But, you know, it fluctuates each year based on student interests and how many students are in the school. So projecting on a more conservative flat level is much more prudent than expecting that. You know, we don't even get those enrollments until sometimes September because of the way the schools operate. So again, you're kind of projecting how many sections you're offering in a school, how many things are going to register for the course. You don't really know until later.
And they are credit hours, not students.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the enrollment also, and in the last 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, we're down significantly in enrollment, about 44%. County student enrollment is also down. Our school, every school in the county, as far as I know, as far as I can tell, has lost students. And that's been a trend, for example, in Queensbury for almost 15 years now. Although our population has grown in Queensbury, we grew 3-4%, sometimes even more. We grow with people that are older, that have already had their children, and henceforth the student enrollment in the schools continues to decline. So I saw your projections on where you think the enrollment of SUNY Adirondack is going to be next year. You know, your projections up until 2025, and it's good to have projections. We all got to have goals, but I guess my question is, what is the real game plan to flip a trend that I don't see changing, but maybe I'm wrong. How do you go flip that? That the trend's going this way, now you're projecting this way. So help me out with that.
Yeah. So when I talk about the strategic enrollment management plan, and you know, we could present that to you in another form if you'd like, because there's a lot of detail behind that about different populations. We can't create more babies. We can't create more teenagers, right? And so the primary focus is on different populations that need to be captured. As we talked about populations from out of the area, athletics does attract students not only from our service area, but from out of the area. Our work in international programs is another strategy that we've incorporated, and we continue to try to show that. We will be entering our second cohort of working with incarcerated individuals, which was for a long time part of New York State's initiative and really the country's initiatives to help those who are incarcerated to be able to get a leg up for when they're released. And so we're working in Washington Correctional Facility. Next year, we'll have our second cohort, so around 45 students. That's another population that we didn't have before. Adult learners in general, those that may not be at retirement age, but those that are those that are undereducated. They may have some college, but not a degree. We're actively recruiting those students to get them to come back and complete a degree. The work that I talked about from the boot camp model is another way to get people an entree in. And again, a lot of those students are more of our adult learners, not recent high school graduates. So I feel like we're very strategic in not just relying on high school graduates. And that's been a strategy for quite some time. So all the different initiatives, even the early college program, getting students earlier to engage in college, and particularly SUNY Adirondack, is another way to build a pipeline. So we have very strategic plans for multiple populations that in total we expect to help bring that enrollment back. Can I say it's easy? It's not. We're in the same boat as many of our peers, but I feel like we've been ahead of the curve in many ways. The other piece, as I mentioned, is retaining the students. Our, community colleges, our open admission, we're happy to do that. But with that brings students that aren't always prepared. And so our ability to be able to attend to their needs is, quite frankly, are personnel intensive, helping us, making sure they have the tutoring support that they need, checking up on students, really bringing those services all around the student requires funds. And that's where we've really focused our grant application, even though that's risky, right? Because you get one-time funds and you're trying to, you hire personnel to help attend the students and you have to maintain those. But retention is just as important as all the different strategies that we put in place to identify other populations of students. Still, of course, focused on our primary mission, which is our service area, as well as those. I hope that gives you a little more.
That helps. Now, with the governor's declaration that all high school students will automatically be accepted, correct, in all state-funded colleges, community college. But what's your gut on that? I mean, are you expecting an increase of 1% that will help, or?
It's so new, Doug. We're not sure yet. The letters just went out to the students, I think this week.
I guess a follow-up question
Yeah.
would be, has it been a detriment in the past? I mean, I'm trying to get a handle on that myself, so.
Like the Excelsior program, is that what you're referring to, where you paid less money for more work?
So, we have been very intentional in working with our high schools. We go into every high school several times a year. We offer what we call instant admission. Basically, come down to the guidance office, talk to us, bring us your transcript, we'll admit you on the spot. We've been doing that for some time. So we'll see, though. There's the sense that by simply sending a letter acknowledging that, hey, by the way, don't forget that if you want to go to college, you have a place at your local community college. I would love to see it result in, and so we'll see how it pans out. We're tracking it very intentionally over the next several months, and we'll see. I'd be happy to report back.
I think that the trend, there's a lot of talk now in the past few years about a lot of young people getting degrees and then working in a grocery store, McDonald's, etc. I think over the trend over the next decade or so bodes well for community colleges, because as people realize that they're going to pay $200,000, $250 million for I'm going to be very blunt, useless degree. If you're out there advertising, advocating for more practical, if you will, degrees or reprogram, whatever, such as the free apprentice, I'll call it, program for industrial, et cetera, I think, and it's the community college is much more economical than a lot of four-year colleges, even state colleges. So I think that community colleges are well positioned over the next decade to increase in with programs that they're economical and actually produce results as far as earnings go, a career thing. So I think I like to think that over the next decade, you're not going to grow exponentially, but it's going to be good for
But I mean, that is why, we're strategically investing in things like these boot camps, and the maybe tiny bit of frustration that we have is programs that are specifically more, career oriented tend to be our higher cost programs, because they typically require things like equipment and those non-credit boot camps are a great model. There's no funding formula that actually helps to support those. So the only way we've been able to do that to make it economical for students, if they can't get financially for those programs, they're not funded by our state aid, is through grants. So our challenge is going to be showing the success of these and continuing to advocate to Department of Labor and to all of our other stakeholders that these are worth investing in just as much, if not more sometimes, than the degree program. So I think we're at the cusp of, I think, what you're talking about. And I do think there is acknowledgement on the state level that workforce development, and that's a broad term that people use in a variety of ways, but community colleges are playing a major role in that. So scaling up our efforts along with the funding to help us do that, we're ready. We're ready.
Earlier in your presentation, Chris, you talked about, I think, expanding at the Wilson campus and also the new programs that are going to be offered here or enhanced programs here. I would think that those are going to make you more competitive with Fulton, Montgomery, Schenectady, Hudson Valley. I mean, do you guys kind of analyze where local kids are going to school and seeing if maybe we missed out on an opportunity to keep them in their backyards?
I wish I had the percentages with me, but you know, our percentage capture rate within our two county sponsors are so higher than which you would expect and want, right? Saratoga, where we do very well in Saratoga County, and to some degree, it's almost like the line of zip codes. Like SUNY Adirondack is really doing well in northern Saratoga, and that's what we expect to do. Hudson Valley tends to have more southern Saratoga because of their location. That's just the reality. So yes, and now moving to this branch campus status, we think we'll even enhance that more. There is room to grow in Saratoga County, no question. There's 4 times your size. So the ability to attract more enrollment at Saratoga is there. So yes.
Yeah, so Mr. Beatty brings up a good point that isn't significant to the college. It's significant to both our counties and people that are on that region. That we do have an elderly population, but in order to even sustain the elderly population, we're going to need an influx of young people for all those positions that are involved in care or recreation or anything that makes young people want to be here. And I think the exodus from the cities from 9/11, then again from COVID, I think the Adirondacks was a big beneficiary of that. Our county was as well, but the Adirondacks in general were. And then with broadband and all those things they're finally going to get here eventually. We're going to have opportunities, but I think as the two county governments, I remember, I think Craig was there at AATV. We used to meet in Lake Placid in the spring before COVID. I think they finally did it this year, but DEC maybe did it. They had one of their presentations was, if you want young people to come, what have you done to attract young people? And I think our work with the college is one of the things we've done. Could we do more? Probably. Will we do more? Have the finances to do more? That's a question. But I think if you really want young people to be there, you have to give them a reason to be there. And I think that's more on our shoulders right now than the colleges, but through the college, we can do a lot. Whether it all pays off, I mean, like you said, the projections are, you got to have a goal and try to reach it. But we have to make it so our young people want to be here. Because once they move away, New York isn't the place everybody wants to come back to, let's be honest. But if we can cover them while they're here and say, hey, it doesn't get much better than this, where we want it.
And that's where our opportunity with our housing students comes into play, like what we can do more intentionally with our county partners to keep the students that come from outside the area. They see the area, they love it. They need to know that there are good paying jobs for them to stay here, that they can afford housing to be able to stay here, all things that matter when you're especially coming right out of college. But we have a captive audience for a couple of years. So I think there's opportunity for us to continue to think creatively about how we connect them better in the community. We've been trying to do that here and there, and I think now post-COVID we're back into that momentum, but we now make it a much more intentional orientation program for them to go out on Lake George while they're here, see it like, wow, this is a great area. And it's clicking with students. We have several stories of students being here from the boroughs and said, I really like it up here and I want to stay, and they stay and they get a job and they're taxpayers, and, you know, so I think we have a real opportunity in that as well as keep the talent that we have as well.
Brian, I'll just, for me personally, I'm here because I spent my summers here. I was a student at Siena College, love Latham. I don't live there. I worked at Canoe Island Lodge in my summers. I was able to live there in this area and enjoy it during a time when I wasn't actually, you know, focused on my studies. And I knew from the moment I spent the first summer here that I didn't want to leave. If there's a way that we can get those students that are here for the fall and spring semester to be able to have like an earn and learn program for the summertime where they can stay here. For me personally, I think we'd be able to capture more of them to be able to remain in the area. That's just my experience, but it's why I'm here.
We implemented a pilot program a year ago with some companies free to see. And students lived on campus over the summer, took a class with us and worked for Great Estate. They into that, we're doing it again with them this year. We had put together a proposal to the county for ARPA funds to scale that up. We weren't successful, but I think the model, we already have it written, we're ready to go. We just need to find another source of funds that can just help offset the transportation costs are a challenge. Paying for housing in the summer, because our housing it's not part of the college, so it's not like a state app that can just open their res halls in the summer and they don't have to pay for it. They have to pay something because we have to pay our staff. So there are some expenses in there, but with a small amount of money, we can really capture people to say, oh, because they're never here during the summer. They're here in the academic year. And of course, we all know, although we love all seasons, but summer is also our best jewel time. And so any way that we students over the summer have them help with the workforce challenges that our hospitality industry has, it's a win-win for everyone. So we'll bring that, we're continuing to look at ways we can get that funded going forward so that address part of what you're doing.
Okay, that's, we'll make a motion to.
For that, do they have to move it to us first? That's my question. Right. I think that. I'll make a second. So.
Thank you, Ken. All in favor?
I'll move it. You gotta vote.
That's all in favor.
I didn't hear it.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Follows out from Washington County, one doing this now their education. Second. Right.
Warren County Finance Committee, I'll entertain a motion to recommend the budget to the full board. Thank you, Supervisor Bruno. Is there a second? Supervisor Thomas, discussion? No discussion, call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None, motion carries.
Thank you all for your support. We do have one more item that we need to discuss with you for consideration, and that will require action on your behalf. We did just find out about it recently, so a little bit of history. It's not really history. Most of you are well aware. Each fall, you pass a resolution supporting the college's capital projects. The capital project resolution that you passed last fall is titled 23-24 because they're always for a year in advance. We're not asking to make any changes to the total dollar amount. We submitted that request. If you'll remember, it had several HERP-related air quality improvement projects in it. When we submitted the request to you, SUNY had suggested that we list them out individually, and we did so. After the state's budget was approved in April and we submitted our project action forms to move those projects along, they requested that we lump them all together. I think they're doing it just so that it's easier for them to process these projects. It has something to do with how they're funded at the state level. But in addition would mean that for some of these that are high cost projects and we don't exactly know how much the rooftop units are, for example, much like you probably don't at, in each of your individual counties, we can kind of roll through the projects without having to do a lot of transfer of funds from one to another as they wrap up. So they have asked us to lump those projects together into one project, and that's what we're here asking you to do. Our board passed this resolution last month. So it doesn't change the projects that we're completing. It doesn't change the dollar amounts. We're not asking you for any funding to support it. All it's simply doing is taking what was like 5, I think, HERF-related capital project air quality improvement projects and lumping them into one. That's really it. Unfortunately, it requires board action from 3 separate boards, but
Second.
On favor?
Motion.
Carries tonight, the motion to approve the capital budget. All those unanimous. Budget carries. All those in favor? Opposed? Passes.
Warren County Finance Committee in regards to the capital project revised. Motion. By Bruno and second Supervisor Thomas. Discussion. Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
thank you all very much. I believe that's all we had. You two.
What's FFPs?
Furniture, fixtures, and equipment.
We have to sub.
That is.
Right.
Warren County Personnel Higher Education, Mr. Adjourned. By Thomas, Gary, it's and opposed.
Warren County Finance, motion to adjourn. Bruno, Thomas, all those in favor? Carries adjourned.
Marshall County 88. We're ready.
Yeah.